Well, we have some 290 TTIs. We're increasing the number of technical training institutes, technical vocational education training institutions. And currently, while we may have approximately 200, by the end of the year we should have 290. We're also building on to the existing capacities of the vocational institutes. They're approximately 750. We have 11 polytechnics and 11 science technology institutes. The total capacity of all of these is far exceeds the current requirement. But what needs to happen is a lot more infrastructure has to be invested in. These institutions are after all the basis for promoting not only the absorption of young people from both primary school, high school, as well as those that finish high school, and university students. They are able to build on to the existing flow of young people into these institutions. And so as a necessity, we need to find ways in which we are able to build more structures and capacities. From a technical vocational education training fraternity, we're also exploring the ideas where we can create clusters between vocational institutions, technical training institutes, and polytechnics. And how this will work is that the polytechnics will focus on the high-end parts of the value chain of competencies. Competencies start with apprenticeship, then go on to craftsmen, master craftsmen, technician, technologists. And so it's possible that, the polytechnics would focus on technologists and technicians, while TVETs would focus on technicians and craftsmen, including master craftsmen, and VETs would focus on artisans, and thereby creating a link and a cluster around thematic areas like agriculture, chemical engineering, and so on. So there's plenty of opportunity to expand this model. TVET is, after all, becoming naturally popular because of its immediate gains in self-employment and gainful employment. But a lot more has to be done in terms of trying to see how we build the necessary infrastructure, build the necessary training capacities, and also see how we're able to promote greater involvement around the competency-based education and training curriculum.
We have seen several innovations, especially like what you are going to see right now, but they are not going anywhere. Maybe what are plans for you are having for them, especially like this one?
Today is an extraordinary day for Kenya. We see that what's demonstrated here is an action, a response to some of the challenges that we face nationally, and the ever challenges that we face within our social, economic and environmental perspectives, but also the changing world that we face in terms of the productive sector, the requirements of productivity, innovation, efficiency. This particular conference brings all those challenges together to see how we can respond to them by promoting research, promoting innovation. So what you see here in abundance is innovative ideas, resourcefulness, contextual possibilities. All of this is the basis for innovation and the basis for transforming this country. What needs to happen now is more rigor has to be put into the system. A system has to be funded, because these are natural solutions that can have an immediate impact in terms of our social economic gains. Some of these demonstrations have also seen how they can actually apply to the Big Four significantly in terms of how we're able to raise the profile and capacities of the Big Four. So once again, I think that what's required here is a emphasis, and the nation has to pay homage to such innovation, to such importance of solutions, and to see how it builds the rigor within the system, but further facilitates it. We're looking for an innovation fund specifically for the TVET sector, so that they're able to expand these innovations into reality. After all, the application and the implications for such kind of innovations are huge. From a TVET perspective, you can have a farmer walking in here looking for higher yields and solutions towards higher yields and productivity improvement in his value chains. You can also have an artisan, a juakali, artisan coming here to see how he could actually improve his manufacturing capacity. So I think that this cannot be ignored anymore. I think that you cannot ignore that there's so much diversity, so much richness in terms of innovation and research, and we need to find a way in which we commercialize it. But this requires funding, dedicated funding and dedicated support from key infrastructure agencies.
Now, you are coming up with an idea that you want industries to fund a vocational training institution. How and how much?
Right, so as vocational institutions, we stand in solidarity with the need of industry's requirements as far as productivity, innovation, efficiency. We, above all, understand the entire value chain from seed to shop. Everything from the markets to the manufacturing processes, the technologies, the capacities in terms of processing, and so on. So our value proposition is to see how we're able to promote the maximum level of benefit. Now that the government has installed a framework called competency-based education and training, it's a highly inclusive structure which ensures that for the first time the private sector insight in terms of their requirements of productivity, innovation, efficiency are carefully captured and therefore transferred to the youth. This enables the youth to be better prepared for employment, be able to innovate, and be able to contribute to the overall success and competitiveness of an industry and the nation's priority in terms of the Big Four agenda. So what we think is that since we are able to promote such benefit, it's high time that there's also an investment. And increasingly, since training is highly beneficial to the industry, we're looking at a possible investment of between 0.5% to 1% of their national turnover. And in return, the benefit they'll accrue is high levels of productivity, innovation and efficiency. We can easily guarantee approximately 30% of productivity gains. With their further involvement, this could increase even more. And so I think that this requires investment, this requires careful consideration of the importance of what we're providing, and in return the acknowledgement of what we're providing that would make a difference to industry.
Okay. TVET, how is it going to help in Big Four agenda that the government is really yearning to achieve?
In various ways, the technical vocational education training sector promotes, out of its outcomes, out of its works and trainings, it promotes high levels of innovation, competencies, skills, entrepreneurship. These are key functions to achieving the Big Four. They're the basis of every single area of President Kenyatta's vision in terms of universal health care, where you'll see that much of this universal healthcare capacity will be mobile clinics, healthcare services, e-diagnosis services. All of these are technologist-based solutions, and within the scope of TVET, we play a responsive role in terms of maintaining, repairing, being able to foretell failures, and also installing them and upgrading these technologies. If you look to the manufacturing sector, we're the basis of manufacturing development. We are involved in their transitions to greater levels of productivity, innovation, efficiency. We facilitate everything from the actual raw material going into a process all the way to the markets. The same with homes and the creation of greater infrastructure. And agriculture. The reason Kenya only exports 17% of its agricultural produce is primarily because of manufacturing processing, our competitiveness globally.
Good. We understand that the TVET trained staff are moving from TSC to Public Service Commission. Why and when?
With the development of and the adaptation of competency-based education training, our priorities have shifted to a rapid requirement in terms of infrastructure and equipment and technologies. But what's fundamental is the trainer. The trainer has to be reflective of competency-based education training, and it's primarily that this trainer now will be a shift from what we used to have in the past. We expect this trainer to be able to have a close relationship with industry. Each of our trainers should actually cultivate 10 relationships with industry in order to promote apprenticeships, joint applied research, being able to have a significant involvement in the overall development of curriculum and occupational standards. The trainer has to have sabbaticals in industry. The person has to be able to know what's the latest trends in industry, has to have a close relationship with the transformation of industry, and take that responsibility into the classroom, where he or she would be involved in a training based on problem solving, where he or she becomes a supervisor, but the problem is actually solved by the student in greater supervision by the trainer. We're looking at outcomes of high levels of competencies, confidence, being able for a young person to truly imagine the real world. And so it was necessary for us to take the highest level of consideration into the welfare of our trainers, and most importantly their professional developments. And so we had to create our own service scheme, a trainer service scheme, and that's the reason why we decided to remove 4,000 trainers, and we'll be supplementing this with an additional 2,000 to solve an acute shortage of trainers throughout our institutions. And subsequently we hope that this structure will yield dividends immediately in terms of a profound capacity in terms of student competencies and so on. We hope to achieve this in July.
Last question, you are launching something new today?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a greater commitment to quality assurance of our processes. With all this work that we're doing in promoting competency-based education training, putting efforts in terms of upgrading equipment, technologies, promoting the trainer development, the outcome is, of course, the student who will be better prepared to be either self-employed, which would mean that this person would be able to become a one-man band and start his or her own business, or promote a high level of gainful employment where they're recognized for their competencies, their levels of productivity, innovation and efficiency to the market. And for us to do this as best as possible, we need to create assessment centers. Assessment centers that break away from the past, where we simply do theoretical exams in classrooms. But this time round we hope to create a situation and a structure which enables the young person to demonstrate what he's or she has learnt by building a device. If it's a welding, if the person's competent in welding, then the person has to weld a particular level of standard, safety and competency within an assessment. And this will be further verified by the productive sector, so that therein our responsibility closes from the perspective of the level of competencies, because after all it's the industry that decides, whether the person is now competent to be put into the real work environment. And subsequently we'll also in the process learn more from what the industry needs and ensure that we're able to reflect on it and build onto our existing systems. What's also very important here is that we hope to create a nexus between the micro, small, medium enterprise sector. For us, the MSME sector is a true partner in the sense that they're the largest promoters of employment today, but it's also their industry that could benefit greatest from TVET reform and TVET competencies by helping them transition into greater sustainability and transformation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bahiga, let me talk to Professor Kere. Professor Kere has been really constantly saying that someone can really move from E to a degree or a PhD. Prof, is this a reality or is it just a dream?
Thank you. I think it is important for us to understand that with the new regulations, which now operationalize the Kenya National Qualifications Framework, we have looked at education and training, the sector across the board, from basic education, mid-level education to higher education in the universities. And I want you to understand the genesis of this. I know the journalists use that catchword, that if you have an E, you can now go to university, enroll in the university. But of course, I like what was emphasized in detail, the steps toward that. The qualifications framework has opened up pathways where Kenyans can move horizontally and vertically within qualifications and attain whatever grade they are able to, the question is, if you are willing and you are able, you should be able to move through the ladder. Let's take, for example, a child who has studied 8 years primary, and then they sit for KCPE. That particular day that they took that paper, mathematics or English, one day, should that paper define this child, that whether they are a success or a failure? The conditions under which that exam was done is a national exam. This child maybe slept hungry the previous night. This child had malaria, the fever, was not in a position to sit that exam. And yet if they perform poorly in that exam, then they are labeled a failure, or even at Form 4. So conditions under which our children operate are varied. And therefore, a fellow can perform poorly in an examination. But thereafter, we should know the conditions that led to that. So the framework opens the pathways so that a child who got an E in the Kenyan system today has an opportunity to enroll in the next level, for example, the artisan courses, do a certificate. And then from there, if they are willing and able, they can do a craft certificate. Then they can move to a diploma. And from a diploma, they can move to a degree. That's how an E individual, or who scored an E, can get to the highest level, providing they are willing, they are interested, and they are able, because the system will filter them through.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Waihika. There you have it. And they have really talked about a lot of issues, especially concerning TVET institution. And as you've heard, some of the key things they have said here, Waihika, is that this is the only key the country should focus on, to invest in such an institution for them to achieve the Big Four agenda. From Uasin Gishu County, from this 7th International Conference, back to you, Waihika.